The Grand Ashford Hotel was a masterpiece of old money and polished lies, the kind of place where chandeliers dripped like icicles from 20-foot ceilings and every sip of champagne tasted like denial. I sat stiffly at a front table, the whiskey glass slick against my palm, condensation bleeding onto the white linen. Around me, the who's who of Boston's society sipped, laughed, pretended. The air smelled of gardenias, perfume, and something rotten that no one dared to acknowledge. At the altar stood my brother, Brendan Reed, golden boy, family savior, liar. And next to him, radiant in a gown that probably cost more than my first car, was Lily Hartman, the picture-perfect society bride. To anyone else, this looked like a fairy tale. But I knew better. The officiant droned on about love, commitment, forever. I barely heard him. My mind buzzed, every nerve ending tight, every muscle wired and waiting. I should have been numb by now. After all, it wasn't fresh. The betrayal had festered for months, maybe longer, hidden beneath hospital lighting and hollow reassurances. My son, Micah, had fought for his life in a sterile bed while my wife, Savannah, slipped away, one late-night errand at a time. And Brendan, my brother, my blood, had been the one catching her when she fell. That's what the text messages said, anyway. The ones I found too late. The ones that seared themselves into my memory like brands. Applause snapped me back to the present. They were married now, sealed with a kiss and a lie. Brendan grinned, handsome and beaming, a man who had never been told no long enough to believe he deserved everything he wanted, even what was mine. Lily clutched his arm, the epitome of grace, utterly unaware that the man beside her had hollowed out his own brother's life without blinking. Or maybe she did know. Maybe she just didn't care. In places like this, appearances outweighed truth every time. A waiter passed by, offering more champagne. I waved him off and took another sip of whiskey instead. The burn grounded me, sharpened the edges. Across the table, Brielle, my sister, gave me a small, tight smile, supportive, worried. She knew. Not everything, but enough. Enough to watch me carefully now, the way you'd watch a ticking bomb whose timer you couldn't quite read. The clinking of a spoon against glass drew the room's attention. Brendan, smug bastard that he was, rose to his feet, his arms still wrapped around Lily's waist. Before we dive into the dancing and debauchery, he said, voice smooth and practiced, I think it's only right that we hear a few words from my brother, Nolan. He turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, daring me to play nice, to keep his secrets wrapped up in a neat bow for the sake of a pretty party. 100 eyes swung to me. I felt the weight of them, felt the expectation thick in the air. The prodigal brother. The family disappointment. The one who couldn't hold his marriage or his grief together long enough to fake a smile at a wedding. I stood slowly, the chair scraping against the marble floor, loud in the hush. I didn't rush. I let them wait. Brendan's smile wavered just slightly. Good. Let him sweat. I lifted my glass. The words came easily, sliding out like a blade from a sheath, polished and deadly. Here's to Brendan, I said, voice steady, carrying across the ballroom. The man who not only stole my wife, but left me to bury my son alone. For a heartbeat, silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, like a dam breaking, the room exploded. Gasps, broken glass, the sharp crack of someone dropping a flute of champagne. Lily's mouth fell open in a perfect O before she stumbled back, away from Brendan, hand flying to her mouth in horror. The priest, who had been flipping through his notes for the next ceremonial blessing, froze, his face blanching as he processed what he just heard. Without a word, he closed his book, tucked it under his arm, and marched down the aisle, his vestments trailing behind him like a ship cutting through wreckage. The chaos bloomed, spreading like a stain. Voices rose, some shocked, some angry, some whispering eagerly like gossip columnists already writing their next headline. I didn't wait to see the fallout. I drained the rest of my whiskey, set the glass down with a quiet finality, and walked away. Every step felt lighter, like chains falling from my shoulders one by one. I didn't look back at Brendan. I didn't need to. I could already hear the unraveling begin behind me, like fabric pulled taut and then shredded by the smallest, sharpest knife. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Brielle rising too, hurrying after me, her heels clattering against the marble. Her voice called out my name, but I kept moving, past stunned guests frozen mid-sip, past waiters standing. The second I pushed through the gold-framed doors into the marble hallway, the noise from the ballroom chased me like a swarm of hornets. Gasps, shouted names, the screech of chairs scraping back from tables. It was the sound of a perfect image tearing apart at the seams. I kept walking, shoulders squared, fists tight at my sides. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. Let them talk. Let them all see the truth for once, raw and ugly, without the silk and polish my family had always wrapped around their sins. Nolan. Brielle's voice rang out, sharp with urgency. I slowed, but didn't turn around until I heard the rapid, uneven click of her heels catching up to me. When I finally looked back, she was already there, eyes wide, cheeks flushed, her cocktail dress swishing around her legs as she caught her breath. Behind her, footsteps pounded louder, heavier, angrier. Brendan. Of course he was coming. A golden boy doesn't let his shine tarnish without a fight. You couldn't just leave it alone, could you? Brendan's voice cracked through the hall like a whip. I turned to face him fully, hands at my sides, head high. He looked every inch the wounded prince, tuxedo perfect, tie slightly loosened, hair much just enough to look heroic if you didn't know the rot underneath. You had to ruin it. You had to make it about you. I laughed, low and bitter. About me? You think this is about me? He stormed closer, Brielle instinctively stepping between us, palms out like a referee caught in a match she never agreed to officiate. Brendan ignored her, eyes locked on mine, his fury plain, unmasked for the first time in years. No smirks. No clever excuses. Just naked desperation bleeding through the cracks. You don't understand, he hissed. Savannah was lonely. You pushed her away. Always at that damn hospital, chasing hope while she needed someone real. I took a step forward, close enough to see the veins popping at his temple, the tremble at the corner of his jaw. My voice dropped, cold and lethal. My son was dying. Our son. And you're standing here telling me Savannah needed someone real? What about Micah, Brendan? What about being there for him? For me. He faltered, mouth opening, then shutting again without a sound. In that moment, under the glare of the chandelier light, he didn't look like the golden boy anymore. He looked small, shrinking. A man who had built his life on borrowed image and stolen trust, now standing in the ruins of it all. Brielle's hand found my arm, squeezing lightly as if to ground me. Her voice, when it came, was trembling but sure. I knew something wasn't right, she whispered, more to herself than to either of us. I knew. I just didn't want to believe it. Brendan spun toward her, desperate now. Brielle, you have to understand. No. She cut him off with a single word, her voice steel-wrapped in silk. Don't you dare. Don't you put this on anyone but yourself. He reeled like she had slapped him. Good. Let him feel just a fraction of the devastation he had dealt out like it was nothing more than a drunken mistake at a party he barely remembered. I trusted you, I said, and it wasn't rage anymore fueling me. It was the hollow ache of betrayal so deep it had no room for shouting. I trusted both of you. I was drowning, and instead of pulling me out, you shoved my head under the water. Brendan looked around wildly, as if expecting someone, anyone, to step in, to take his side, to save him the way they always had. But the hallway was empty now, the doors behind us closed. No audience. No admirers. Just us. Just the truth laid bare between marble walls and burning memories. I didn't mean for it to happen, he mumbled, the words limp and useless. It just did. I shook my head slowly, pity threading through the anger like poison in a vein. Things like this don't just happen, Brendan. You made a choice. Every late-night call. Every skipped hospital visit. Every lie you told Lily and Brielle and me. You made a choice over and over again. He sagged against the wall, one hand dragging through his hair. For a moment, he looked every bit the boy who used to sneak into my room at night after a bad dream, begging me to let him stay. But that boy was gone. Had probably been gone longer than I realized. Maybe I'd just been too blinded by loyalty to see it. You think you're the hero here? He sneered suddenly, baring his teeth in a snarl of a smile. You think blowing up my wedding fixes anything? No, I said simply. But it sure as hell ends the lie. Brielle tugged gently at my arm. Come on, she murmured. He's not worth it. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I agreed with her. I turned without another word, leaving Brendan slumped against the cold marble, drowning in a mess of his own making. Each step away from him felt cleaner, lighter, like shedding a skin I'd outgrown without even realizing it. As we moved toward the exit, the noise from the ballroom pressed against the doors, a tidal wave of chaos about to crash through the hotel's perfect facade. But I didn't care anymore. Let them all see it. Let them see what happened when you built a kingdom on betrayal and lies. I was done pretending. Done carrying the weight of their secrets like a penance for sins that were never mine. Tonight, the mask cracked. And Brendan Reed, for once in his charmed life, would have to live in the wreckage. The night outside hit me like a slap, cold and biting, carving through the thin layer of heat and adrenaline still clinging to my skin. Boston streets gleamed slick under the glow of streetlights, the pavement wet from an earlier drizzle. I stood by the valet stand, breathing in great gulps of sharp air, trying to scrape the remnants of the night off my lungs. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't suffocating under the weight of what I couldn't say. I had ripped it out, ugly and raw, and left it bleeding on the ballroom floor. And God, it felt good. Brielle caught up moments later, her heels clicking on the marble behind me, a staccato heartbeat of concern. She didn't speak right away, and I didn't either. We just stood there, two Reed siblings stripped of pretense, staring out into a city that didn't care about the wreckage we were leaving behind. I shoved my hands deep into the pockets of my suit pants, rolling my shoulders back, feeling them loosen in a way they hadn't since before Micah fell sick. "I'm sorry," Brielle said at last, her voice small, choked with guilt she didn't owe. "I should have said something. I should have seen it." I shook my head slowly, still staring straight ahead where the valet hustled to bring around some couple's silver Maserati. "You saw," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "You just didn't want to believe it." She flinched like I'd struck her, but I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was tired. Tired of lies, tired of bending myself into pretzels to protect people who didn't deserve the effort. For months, I twisted the truth into something almost palatable, convincing myself Brendan and Savannah would never cross that line. That I was just paranoid, crazy with grief, seeing shadows where there were none. Turns out, I had been right to be suspicious. I just hadn't trusted myself enough. "I loved him, you know," Brielle said, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "Not like that. But he was always the one who made me feel like we were a team. You, me, Brendan. Against the world." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Turns out he was just making sure we never turned against him. She glanced at me then, her eyes wide and wet in the flickering light. "How are you not losing it right now?" I turned my face up to the sky, breathing in the cold until my lungs burned. "I already did," I said quietly. "When Micah died, when Savannah started disappearing for errands that took all night, when Brendan stopped answering my calls because he was busy with work, I lost it all then. Tonight, I just finally stopped pretending." Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't the suffocating kind. It was the silence of truth settling heavy between two people who had run out of ways to sugarcoat it. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, the driver hopping out and handing the keys to the valet. Across the street, a homeless man pushed a shopping cart filled with rattling cans and tattered blankets. Life went on, indifferent to the implosion happening inside the gilded walls of the Grand Ashford. "You don't have to keep carrying them," Brielle said after a moment, her voice trembling. "You don't have to keep carrying any of it." I turned toward her fully then, really seeing her. The little sister who used to follow me around with scraped knees and wide, adoring eyes. The one who believed in magic long after the rest of us learned better. She had grown up into someone brave enough to chase me into the storm tonight, and for that alone, I owed her honesty. "I know," I said simply. "I'm done." And I meant it. In that moment, the clarity was cold and absolute. I didn't know Brendan my silence. I didn't know Savannah my forgiveness. I didn't know my parents their careful, curated family image that had been rotting from the inside out long before tonight. I didn't know anyone anything that cost me my peace. The hotel doors burst open behind us with a bang, and a burst of noise spilled out. Shouting, confusion, the chaotic aftermath of truth detonated in a room full of fragile lies. Brendan's name echoed once, twice, someone calling out in panic or anger. I didn't even glance back. Brielle did, briefly, her mouth tightening into a hard line. "They're going to blame you, you know," she said softly. I smiled, a slow, grim thing. "They can try." She stepped closer, touched my arm, hesitant. "You're not alone, Nolan. You never were." For the first time in a long while, I believed her. The valet approached, awkwardly clearing his throat, holding out a ticket in one hand. "Can I call you a cab, sir?" I shook my head. I didn't want to get into a car. I didn't want to sit still with all this electricity humming under my skin. I needed to move, to breathe, to remind myself that I was still alive, still capable of walking away from the wreckage without dragging it with me. "I'll walk," I said, tucking my hands back into my pockets. "Thanks." Brielle hesitated, then nodded, understanding. She reached up and pressed a kiss to my cheek, fierce and sudden. Call me tomorrow? I will. She watched me for a beat longer, like she wanted to say something else, but in the end, she just let me go. I turned my back on the hotel, on the wreckage, on the people scrambling to salvage what little was left of their precious illusions. My shoes hit the pavement in a steady rhythm, each step a small, defiant act of reclamation. The cold seeped deeper into my bones, but I welcomed it. It kept me sharp. It reminded me I could feel something other than rage and sorrow. It reminded me I was still here. I walked into the night, leaving shattered glass and shattered masks behind me. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't look back. By the time I stumbled into my apartment, half frozen from the long walk, heart still pounding from the fallout behind me, the city outside had settled into its usual midnight hum. Traffic lights blinked on empty streets. The occasional siren howled in the distance. Boston always slept with one eye open. I dropped my keys onto the entryway table, stripped off my jacket, and stood in the silence for a long moment, listening to the quiet groan of old radiators and the faint buzz of the refrigerator. It should have been comforting. It should have been enough to soothe the chaos rattling inside my chest. But peace wasn't something you found just because you kicked off your shoes and locked the door. Sometimes, the ghost slipped through anyway. I moved on autopilot toward the kitchen, pulling a half-empty bottle of whiskey from the cabinet. As I poured myself 2 fingers into a glass, my phone buzzed on the counter. Once, twice, then again, and again. I frowned, setting the bottle down harder than necessary, the amber liquid sloshing over the rim. I wiped my hand on my jeans and grabbed the phone. 52 notifications. Texts, missed calls, emails, social media pings I hadn't cared about in months. My stomach twisted as I unlocked the screen. A barrage of group chats flashed before my eyes. Brielle, Maya, even old high school friends I hadn't heard from since Micah's funeral. And then I saw it. A video thumbnail, me standing in the Grand Ashford Ballroom, glass raised high, the chandeliers blurring like stars behind me. Brother exposes affair at Boston high society wedding, the headline screened. I clicked play with numb fingers. There I was, frozen in time. Shoulders squared, voice steady, detonating my family's carefully built facade with one merciless sentence. Even through the grainy phone footage, the gasp from the guests hit like a tidal wave. Lily's scream. The priest walking out without a backward glance. The champagne glasses slipping from stunned hands. It was all there. Brutal. Unfiltered. True. I closed the video and scrolled further. More posts, more headlines. Boston elite wedding ends in scandal after groom's brother reveals affair. Justice for Micah was trending. Thousands of posts flooding Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Strangers reposting my words. Friends tagging me with fists raised and digital solidarity. Memes. Hashtags. TikTok duets of girls crying into their phones, declaring I was a hero for standing up for my son, for refusing to stay silent. News outlets scrambling to confirm identities. Some blurring faces. Others not bothering at all. Brendan's polished, camera-ready smile stared back at me from older articles, side by side with screenshots of Savannah's Instagram photos, glamorous snapshots of parties and vacations and all the nights she said she was too tired to come home. And beneath it all, the comments piled up, endless and vicious. How could a brother do that? I hope the cheaters lose everything. Micah deserved better. My throat tightened. I pressed the heel of my hand hard against my eyes, willing to burn away. I hadn't done this for validation. I hadn't blown up Brendan's wedding for applause. I'd done it because I couldn't stand to swallow the poison anymore. Because Micah's memory deserved better than whispered pity and polite lies. Another message popped up. Brielle, call me when you see this. Please. Before I could respond, another call buzzed through an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. The world wasn't just whispering anymore. It was shouting. I slumped onto the couch, the whiskey glass dangling from my fingers, untouched. My phone buzzed again, vibrating across the coffee table like a wasp trapped in a jar. This wasn't just gossip. This was a reckoning. And somehow, impossibly, I wasn't the villain this time. I was the brother who told the truth when everyone else kept polishing the lie. A slow, grim smile tugged at my mouth. It was a strange thing, feeling the tide shift under your feet, realizing for once it was carrying you forward instead of trying to drown you. I set the whiskey down and leaned back against the worn leather, letting my head tip against the couch cushion. The room around me blurred, the edges softening in the dim light. I could still hear Micah's laugh in the back of my mind, bright and bubbling, the way he used to launch himself into my arms after a long day at the hospital. He would have been proud. Not because I'd humiliated Brendan. Not because the world finally saw him for what he was. But because I finally stood up for both of us. Another ping. An old college buddy this time. Nolan, proud of you, man. Long overdue. You deserved better. Micah deserved better. I swallowed hard past the knot in my throat. Yeah, we did. I wasn't stupid. I knew the storm was just beginning. Brendan would fight back. Savannah would spin her own story. My parents, my parents would call, would plead, would scold, would demand I apologize for airing dirty laundry in public. Their version of love had always been transactional, measured in appearances and alliances. They wouldn't understand why I had chosen truth over decorum. They never had. But for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't care. Let them rage. Let them plot. Let them try to salvage their reputations with soft lies and practiced smiles. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was done sacrificing myself on the altar of their expectations. I pulled up the trending page one more time, watching the tidal wave crest higher, stronger. Someone had started a GoFundMe for single dads raising the next generation of Micahs. It was absurd. It was beautiful. It was messy and human and real in a way nothing about my old life had ever been. The world had cracked open tonight. And for once, I was on the side standing in the light. I tipped my head back and laughed, the sound rough and disbelieving in the empty room. It wasn't joy, not yet. But it was something close. Something that tasted like freedom. Let the internet roar. Let the truth run wild. I wasn't afraid anymore. Morning bled into afternoon before I finally peeled myself off the couch. My phone had died sometime after 3 a.m., buzzing itself to death with a relentless flood of calls, texts, and mentions. When I plugged it back in, it lit up like a slot machine, notifications rolling in faster than I could process. Somewhere between the memes, the news articles, and the DM requests from strangers who suddenly thought they knew my story, Brielle's name kept popping up. When I finally called her, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Maya and I found something, she said, voice clipped, urgent. You're going to want to sit down. I was already sinking back into the couch, bracing for whatever new blow was coming. Go ahead. Brielle hesitated for a beat, as if giving me one last chance to back out. Then she plunged forward. Savannah wasn't Brendan's first, and she sure as hell wasn't his only. The words hung there between us, heavy and ugly. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay silent, to let her finish. Maya talked to a few people, Brielle continued. Quietly. She still has a lot of connections from when she used to work events for the Ashford. She reached out to a couple of Brendan's old girlfriends. Ex-fiancés, even. I closed my eyes briefly. I already knew where this was going, but hearing it aloud twisted the knife deeper. 2 women came forward, Brielle said, her voice softening. One of them, she was engaged to Briar Caldwell. I opened my eyes again, staring at the cracks in my ceiling. Briar Caldwell, Maya's fiancé. Solid. Dependable. A guy who made loyalty look effortless. And Brendan had gone after his woman too. Same story, Brielle said. Charm. Manipulation. Lies. Acting like he was rescuing them from something, only to turn around and wreck their lives. My stomach turned, nausea rolling through me like a tide. How long have you known? She bristled. Not about this. I swear. I didn't know it went this deep. I knew Brendan wasn't the golden boy everyone thought he was. I knew he lied sometimes. But I didn't realize how much was rotting underneath. I believed her. God help me, I did. Brielle had always wanted to see the best in us, even when the evidence begged her not to. What do you want to do with it? She asked, tentative. I stared at the phone in my hand, at the tiny blinking cursor waiting for me to say something. Anything. I thought about Brendan's sneer last night, the way he tried to rewrite history with half-baked excuses. I thought about Micah, about every night I sat in that hospital praying for a miracle while my wife found comfort in my brother's arms. I don't want revenge, I said slowly, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I just want the truth out there. No spin. No cover-ups. Brielle exhaled shakily. Okay. I can help with that. Maya can too. A fresh wave of gratitude washed over me, bittersweet and aching. I had spent so long thinking I was alone in the wreckage. But maybe I wasn't. Maybe, just maybe, there were still people willing to stand in the fire with me. We agreed to meet later that afternoon. Maya had compiled everything: testimonies, screenshots, timelines. She was meticulous, her instincts sharpened by years of navigating society's glossy minefields. When we sat down at her small, cluttered apartment, She laid it all out on the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. Here's the timeline with Savannah, she said, tapping one stack of papers. And here's everything we found about the others. Different women. Same pattern. Love bombing. Isolation. Cheating. Lying. Ghosting. I skimmed through the files, my stomach hardening into stone. It wasn't just betrayal. It was pathology. He doesn't care who he hurts, I murmured. Maya nodded grimly. He's charming enough to make you think it's love. Until he's done with you. I leaned back, rubbing a hand over my face. It was all there, laid bare in black and white. Brendan's real legacy. Not the golden boy. Not the architect of dreams. Just a man who fed on admiration, who hollowed out the people closest to him until there was nothing left but ruins. What do you want to do? Maya asked gently. We can leak it. Anonymously. You never have to put your name on it. I looked at the files again. At the lives Brendan had uprooted without a second thought. At the wreckage he left behind. Always moving on before the dust could settle. No, I said quietly. No anonymous leaks. No playing games. Brielle blinked at me, surprised. You're sure? I'm sure. I met their eyes, steady. If the truth's coming out, it's coming out the right way. No more hiding. No more half-truths. They both nodded. For the first time in a long while, I felt something solid beneath my feet. We spent the next few hours strategizing. How to present the information clearly, honestly. How to make sure it wasn't twisted into a smear campaign. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. About protecting the next person who might stumble into Brendan's orbit, blind and trusting.